After dropping my wife off at the international airport for her business trip, my 10-year-old daughter whispered from the back seat, "Daddy, we can't go home. I heard Mommy planning something that will happen to us tonight." So we hid. Parked 3 houses away from our own home lights, off hearts pounding. 10 minutes later, I went numb with horror. I really appreciate you being here today. Quick question, where are you watching from? Drop your location below. That opening raises something profound. How well do we truly know those closest to us? Important note, this is a fictional story created for entertainment, though the themes about trust and family offer meaningful insights. Let's dive in. My name is Graham Steele. I'm 56 years old, and I've spent most of my career as a chief electrical engineer designing safety systems for homes across Denver. I trust blueprints, clean circuits, and predictable outcomes. People not so much. But on that Thursday evening in late summer, I learned that the most dangerous thing in your life can be the person sleeping beside you. It was 6:30 p.m. when I pulled up to Denver International Airport. The wind off the Rockies had that sharp bite warning of autumn's approach. My wife Diane, 50 years old, composed beautiful in her navy blazer, sat in the passenger seat checking her phone. She was headed to a 3-day conference in San Francisco. Or so she said. "Call me when you land," I told her as we merged onto Peña Boulevard. "Of course," she replied without looking up. In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of our daughter Lily, 10 years old, hazel eyes, hands clasped tight in her lap. She stared out the window with an intensity that didn't match the suburban scenery rolling past. "You okay back there, sweetheart?" "I'm fine, Daddy." But she wasn't. I could feel it, that parental instinct that knows when something's wrong, even if you can't name it. Still, I figured she was just upset about her mother leaving. At the terminal, Diane kissed my cheek, quick, obligatory, then reached back to squeeze Lily's hand. "Be good for Daddy. I'll bring you something special from San Francisco." Lily nodded, but didn't smile. Diane grabbed her carry-on and disappeared through the sliding glass doors. The departure board flashed flight times. Normal. Everything felt so goddamn normal. I merged back onto I-70 classic rock playing low on the radio. The plan was to drop Lily at my co-worker Andrew's house while I caught up on work emails. His daughter Sophie would keep Lily entertained. Easy. Predictable. Then we hit a red light at Quebec, and 56th, one of those Colorado lights that feels like it lasts forever. I was drumming my fingers on the steering wheel when I felt it. A small, trembling hand wrapped around my forearm. I looked down. Lily had unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned forward between the seats. Her fingers dug into my arm with surprising force. When I turned to face her, what I saw made my breath catch. Terror. Pure, unfiltered fear in her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, voice shaking. "We can't go home tonight." I blinked. "What, Lily? What are you talking about?" "Please, Daddy, don't go home." Her voice cracked and suddenly tears were streaming down her face. "We can't be there tonight. Something bad is going to happen. Something really, really bad." I glanced in the rearview mirror, then back at her. My first instinct was to laugh it off. Maybe she'd watched too many scary movies or had a nightmare that felt too real. But the look on her face stopped me cold. "Lily, sweetheart, slow down. What do you mean we can't go home?" She was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. "There are bad men coming to our house tonight, Daddy. They're going to burn it down. Mommy arranged it. She said we're supposed to be inside when it happens. She said it would look like an accident, like the electrical system failed or something. But Daddy, it's not an accident. She planned it." The light turned green. Someone honked behind me, but I couldn't move. I sat there frozen, staring at my 10-year-old daughter as she fell apart in the back seat. "Lily, that's a very serious thing to say." Why would you? Because I saw her, Lily cried. Months ago, I saw Mommy kissing another man at a coffee shop near our house, and I've been hearing things, Daddy. Phone calls late at night when she thought I was asleep. She was talking about money, about insurance policies, about making it look like an electrical fire so nobody would ask questions. An electrical fire. My blood ran cold. That was my field. My entire career built on preventing exactly that kind of disaster. She said tonight, Lily continued, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. She said it would happen while she's in San Francisco, so she'd have an alibi. She said we'd both be gone, and she'd get all the insurance money. She called it the only way out. Daddy, I'm so scared. Please, we can't go home. We just can't. Another honk. Louder this time. High beams flashed in my mirrors, but all I could hear was my daughter's voice telling me that the woman I'd married 19 years ago, the woman I'd suffered through 11 brutal years of IVF with, who'd sobbed with joy when Lily was finally born, had orchestrated our deaths like she was planning a dinner party. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Every logical part of my brain was screaming that this couldn't be real. Kids misunderstand things. They overhear conversations out of context. Maybe Lily had a bad dream and couldn't separate it from reality. But then I looked at her face again. Really looked at her. At the way her eyes were pleading with me to believe her, to finally pay attention. After all those years, I'd been too buried in circuit diagrams and project deadlines to notice what was happening in my own home. And something clicked. I pulled over to the shoulder of the road, put the car in park, and twisted around in my seat to face her directly. Lily, I said quietly, reaching back to take both her trembling hands in mine. I believe you. Her face crumpled with relief. You do. I do. I squeezed her hands gently. And you're right. We're not going home. But we're not going to Andrew's house either. Then where? We're going back to our neighborhood. I said, my engineer's brain already working through the logistics. But we're not going inside the house. We're going to park somewhere they won't see us. Somewhere we can watch. And we're going to wait. But what if the bad men come? Then we'll see them. And we'll call the police. I kept my voice calm, steady, the same tone I used when explaining complex electrical systems to nervous clients. If you're wrong, we'll laugh about this tomorrow and maybe cut back on the crime shows. But if you're right, I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. I checked my mirrors, pulled back onto the road, and headed toward Cherry Creek. The Denver skyline glittered in the distance, beautiful, indifferent, completely unaware that somewhere in its maze of streets and houses, someone was planning murder. Our neighborhood was quiet when I turned onto the street. People were inside eating dinner, watching TV, living their normal Thursday evening lives. I drove slowly past our house, the two-story colonial with the porch light. I always forgot to turn off the flower beds Diane obsessed over, the mailbox with our family name painted in neat black letters. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down more than necessary. Instead, I drove 3 houses past ours and pulled behind a cluster of old cottonwood trees that cast deep shadows across the sidewalk. I killed the engine, killed the headlights. The street fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic on Colorado Boulevard and the whisper of wind through leaves. The dashboard clock glowed 7:03 p.m. when we first settled into our hiding spot. Now, nearly an hour later, that same clock read 7:58, and every minute felt like it stretched into eternity. I'd climbed into the back seat with Lily keeping one arm wrapped around her trembling shoulders while my eyes stayed locked on our house 3 doors down. From this angle, partially obscured by the cottonwoods, I could see our front porch, the living room windows with their warm yellow light, and the driveway where Diane's Honda should have been parked if she'd actually gone to San Francisco. Daddy. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. I need to tell you something else. I tore my gaze away from the house and looked down at her. In the dim glow of the streetlights filtering through the leaves, her face looked older than 10, like she'd aged years in the past hour. What is it, sweetheart? She took a shaky breath. I didn't just hear Mommy on the phone. I saw her. With him. 6 months ago. My chest tightened. Where? There's this coffee shop in Cherry Creek, the fancy one near the shopping center. Her voice cracked. I was supposed to be at softball practice, but coach canceled because of rain. Mommy didn't know. I walked over to surprise her because she'd said she was meeting a friend for coffee. Lily's fingers twisted in the fabric of her jacket. When I got there, I saw her through the window. She was sitting really close to this man, not like friends sit. And then she kissed him. Not on the cheek, Daddy. A real kiss. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. What happened next? I ran away before she could see me, but when we got home that night, she knew. I don't know how, but she knew I'd been there. Lily's eyes filled with tears. She came into my room after you went to bed. She sat on my bed and held my hand like she was being nice, but her grip was too tight. She said, "What you saw today is our secret. If you tell Daddy, it will break his heart and destroy our family, and that would be your fault, Lily. Do you want to be responsible for tearing this family apart?" Jesus Christ. She made me promise. Lily continued, her voice breaking. Why, she made me swear on everything I loved that I wouldn't tell you. She said if I did, you'd be so angry and sad that you might leave us both. She said you'd blame me for not telling you sooner. I pulled Lily closer, feeling rage and heartbreak war inside my chest. This woman I'd married, this woman I'd trusted with everything, had manipulated our 10-year-old daughter into keeping her affair secret by weaponizing a child's fear of abandonment. Lily, look at me. I waited until she met my eyes. None of this is your fault. Not one single bit of it. You were scared, and she took advantage of that. That's on her, not you. But I should have told you. You were protecting yourself and trying to hold our family together. That's what kids do when adults put them in impossible situations. I brushed a tear from her cheek. You're telling me now. That's what matters. She nodded, then tensed suddenly. Daddy, look. I followed her gaze. A vehicle was turning onto our street, not a sedan or SUV, but a dark-colored van with no visible license plate. It moved slowly, almost predatory, like it was scoping out the neighborhood. My pulse kicked up. Is that? I don't know. Maybe Lily's fingernails dug into my arm. The van crept past 2 houses, then 3. When it reached ours, it slowed to a crawl before pulling into our driveway. The clock read 10:15 p.m. Get down, I whispered, pushing Lily lower in the seat even as I leaned forward to see better. The van's engine cut off. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then both front doors opened simultaneously, and 2 figures emerged into the shadowy driveway. They were big, not bodybuilder big, but tall and broad-shouldered, in a way that suggested they worked with their hands. Both wore dark clothing, hooded sweatshirts pulled low over their faces, and gloves. Not winter gloves. Work gloves. That's them, Lily breathed. Daddy, that's them. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The 2 men weren't heading for the front door. Instead, they split up, one walking around the left side of the house toward the backyard, the other heading right toward the garage. I dialed 911, my thumb hovering over the call button as I watched them work. The one near the garage crouched low near the foundation. The other disappeared around back. The call connected. 911, what's your emergency? I kept my voice low and steady. There are 2 men breaking into a house at our address on Maple Street in Cherry Creek. I think they're going to set it on fire. Sir, can you... I hung up. No name, no callback number that could be easily traced back to me in real time. If this went south, I needed the investigation, to follow the evidence, not get tangled up in questions about why I was hiding in a car down the street. From this distance, I couldn't make out exactly what they were doing. Just dark shapes crouching near the foundation hands, moving in quick, deliberate motions. The one who'd gone to the back reappeared and jogged to the van, opening the rear doors briefly before returning to join his partner near the garage. Then I saw it, the flicker of a lighter. "Oh, God," I whispered. The flame caught immediately. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a small orange glow at the base of the garage. But within seconds it spread with terrifying speed, racing up the wooden siding like it had been doused in accelerant. Because it probably had been. The 2 men jogged back to the van, not running, but not wasting time either. They climbed in, started the engine, and pulled away down the street without headlights. Professional. Practiced. Daddy, I see it. The fire was climbing now, eating through the garage door and licking at the first-floor windows. In the distance, I could hear sirens. The 911 call had gotten through fast, thank God. But even as those blessed sounds grew closer, I watched flames engulf the home where Lily had learned to walk, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where I'd foolishly believed we were safe. The fire truck rounded the corner, lights blazing red and white against the night sky. Neighbors were emerging from their houses, now cell phones out, voices raised in shock and concern. I pulled Lily tight against my chest, feeling her whole body shake with silent sobs. "We're safe," I murmured into her hair, watching firefighters pour from their truck and start unspooling hoses. "We're not in there. You saved us, Lily. You saved us both." She turned her face into my shoulder. "I was so scared you wouldn't believe me." "I believe you, sweetheart. I believe you." By 10:45 p.m., our street had transformed into chaos. Fire trucks blocked Maple Street lights, strobing through smoke-filled darkness. Firefighters shouted orders while battling the blaze consuming our home. Neighbors clustered on sidewalks, watching in horror. The air reeked of burning wood and melted plastic. I was still holding Lily in our SUV 3 houses down when I heard tires squealing. Headlights raced down the street, weaving around fire trucks before slamming to a stop. Diane's silver Honda, the car that should have been at Denver International Airport. "Stay close," I told Lily as we climbed out. Diane burst from her car like something was chasing her. Her hair hung loose and disheveled. Her blazer wrinkled. She looked like she'd been driving for hours. "Graham." Her scream cut through the chaos. "Lily." She ran, stumbling over fire hoses, pushing past a firefighter. "My husband, my daughter, they're inside." The crowd turned. I saw it on their faces, immediate sympathy, horror, pity for this desperate woman who thought she'd lost everything. It was Oscar-worthy. "Please." She grabbed the fire chief's arm. "You have to get them out. My baby's in there." "Ma'am, we're doing everything. Graham, Lily." I stepped forward into the light, leading Lily by the hand. "Diane." She spun toward my voice, and for half a heartbeat, her face did something I'd never seen before. Her eyes went wide with something that made my blood run cold. Not relief. Horror. Pure horror that we were alive. Then her expression shifted. Tears flooded her eyes. Her hands flew to her mouth. Oh, thank God, you're alive, you're both alive. She rushed forward, dropped to her knees, and pulled Lily into a crushing embrace. My baby, my sweet baby, I thought I'd lost you. Lily stood rigid, not hugging back. Diane didn't notice. She was too busy crying, performing for the sympathetic crowd. The fire chief approached. Sir, I'm Chief Martinez. We've swept the structure, no casualties. No one was inside when the fire started. That's because we weren't home, I said calmly. Diane pulled back from Lily, face streaked with tears. She looked up at me with something desperate in her eyes. Where were you? Graham, you were supposed to put Lily to bed early. You said you'd be home all evening. I kept my voice steady. Lily wanted ice cream. We went to that place on Colfax, then drove around for a while. She couldn't sleep. Such a simple lie. Mundane. The kind of thing that happens in families every day. But Diane's face went pale under the flashing lights. Ice cream, she repeated slowly. Yeah. I squeezed Lily's hand. Good thing, too. Otherwise, I let the sentence hang. Otherwise, we'd be dead. A Denver police officer approached. Ma'am, can I ask you a few questions? Diane stood wiping her face with practiced ease. Of course, officer. We were told you were supposed to be out of town. Why are you here? My flight was canceled. Last-minute mechanical issue. Her voice broke perfectly on cue. The next available flight wasn't until tomorrow morning, and I just wanted to come home. I was tired, I missed my family, so I drove back from the airport. What time did you leave DIA? Around 9, I think, maybe 9:30. She glanced at me. I was almost home when I saw the smoke and emergency vehicles. I just knew something was wrong. Another perfect answer. Plausible. Checkable. I stood watching her weave her web of lies, understanding with crystal clarity that this woman had planned our murders with the same attention to detail she used for dinner parties. Now that her plan had failed, she was improvising, adapting, performing. Sir Chief Martinez turned to me. You'll need somewhere to stay tonight. Red Cross is setting up emergency housing at a hotel nearby. We'll take the hotel, I said before Diane could offer an alternative. I'll ride with you, Diane said quickly, stepping close. Her hand found my arm. We should stay together, as a family. The word tasted like poison. Of course, I said neutrally. Let's go. The Red Cross coordinator gave us an address, Hampton Inn, 10 minutes away. 2 rooms, side by side. I buckled Lily into the back seat while Diane climbed into the passenger seat. As I pulled away from the smoking ruins, Diane turned to me. Graham. Her voice was soft, probing. Why didn't you take Lily to Andrew's house like you'd planned? You said you were going to work on project files while she played with Sophie. I changed my mind. I said simply, eyes on the road. But why? Does it matter? I glanced at her. We're safe. That's what counts. She stared at me, trying to read me, trying to figure out if I suspected anything. Then she turned to the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. I just want to understand, she murmured. I can't believe this happened. Our home. Everything. In the back seat, Lily's small hand found mine between the seats. Her grip was so tight it hurt fingernails digging into my palm, like she was holding on for dear life. And maybe she was, because both of us knew the most dangerous part wasn't over. It was just beginning. The digital clock read 2:00 a.m. when I gave up trying to sleep. The Hampton Inn room smelled like industrial cleaner. Diane lay in the bed nearest the door, breathing slow and even. Lily was curled tight in the other bed. Both appeared asleep, but I couldn't be sure anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flames, and worse, that flash of horror on Diane's face when she'd realized we were alive. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. Moving quietly, I crossed to the desk where Diane had dropped her keys. I picked them up slowly, waiting for any change in her breathing. Nothing. I slipped out, letting the door close with the softest click. The drive back took 12 minutes. When I turned onto Maple Street, our house stood as a blackened skeleton still smoldering. The smell of smoke hung heavy, and there sat Diane's silver Honda exactly where she'd left it during her performance. I parked a block away and walked back. The neighborhood was silent. No police, no investigators. They'd return at first light. I approached her car, looking over my shoulder. My hands shook as I fitted her key into the trunk lock. It opened with a soft click. At first glance, everything looked normal. Grocery bags, first aid kit, jumper cables. But I knew Diane. If there was evidence, it would be hidden but accessible. I lifted the carpeted mat covering the spare tire well. There it was, a cheap prepaid burner phone. I pressed the power button. It lit up no password. The text thread made my blood run cold. Unknown number done. 65,000 wired, Diane half now. Half when confirmed. Unknown number. What about the kid, Diane? Collateral damage acceptable. Collateral damage. My daughter. My Lily. Reduced to a military phrase. I gripped the trunk edge to steady myself. Then I pulled out my phone and started photographing everything. Every text, every detail, every timestamp. I kept digging. Beneath the burner phone was a manila folder. Inside were documents, printouts, handwritten notes. The first thing I recognized was my own work. Electrical blueprints for our house. The schematics I'd drawn 3 years ago. My signature at the bottom. But someone had made additions. In Diane's sharp handwriting were notes in the margins. Technical notes about overload points, about which circuits could be shorted, about creating cascading failure that would look accidental. She'd studied my work like a murder manual, learned enough to explain exactly how to burn down our house and make it look like my design flaw. The irony was sickening. I photographed every page, capturing her handwriting clearly. Then I found the insurance documents, recent, updated 3 months ago. I'd signed them without looking, trusting Diane when she said our coverage needed updating. Life insurance for Graham Steele, $4.5 million. Life insurance for Lily Steele, $650,000. Property insurance for the house, $1.7 million. Beneficiary on all Diane Steele. Total payout if we died, nearly $7 million. That's what she'd calculated we were worth dead. I stood there in the darkness, looking at documents proving she'd spent months planning our murders with the efficiency of an accountant. She'd researched, prepared, put it all together piece by piece. And she'd almost succeeded. I photographed the insurance documents, making sure every number was visible. Then I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, and closed the trunk. No evidence I'd been here. When I slipped back into the hotel room at 3:30 a.m., Diane was still motionless, either asleep or very good at faking it. I didn't go back to bed. Instead, I went into the bathroom, closed the door, and sat on the cold tile floor. In the harsh fluorescent light, I scrolled through the photos again. The texts, the blueprints with her handwriting, the insurance policies, evidence of premeditated murder. I thought about the woman sleeping 20 feet away, the woman I'd loved for 19 years, the woman I'd endured 11 years of IVF hell with, and I tried to reconcile that person with the killer who'd written collateral damage acceptable about our daughter. I couldn't. Maybe I'd been married to a stranger all along. My phone buzzed. Barbara Grant, my father's lawyer friend. Her message was brief. Can't sleep either. If you need to talk, call me anytime. I started typing, "I need help. Can we meet first thing tomorrow? It's urgent." Her response came immediately. "My office, 7 a.m. I'll be there." I put the phone down and looked at my hands. They'd finally stopped shaking. Tomorrow I'd show Barbara the evidence. Tomorrow we'd figure out the next move. But tonight I sat in hotel bathroom darkness and accepted the truth I'd been avoiding. My wife had tried to murder me and our daughter for money, and now I had proof. By 9 o'clock Friday morning, I'd made a decision. After a sleepless night, sitting on a hotel bathroom floor, staring at evidence of my wife's plan to murder me and our daughter, one thing had become crystal clear: I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. Professional help. I left Diane at the hotel with Lily, told her I needed to handle some insurance paperwork and would be back in a few hours. She'd looked at me with those searching eyes, trying to read whether I suspected anything, but I'd kept my face neutral. Years of presenting to corporate clients had taught me how to hide what I was thinking. Now I sat in the downtown office of Barbara Grant, the woman who'd been my father's closest friend and legal advisor for over 30 years. She was 65, with steel gray hair cut in a no-nonsense bob and the kind of sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. When my father died 4 years ago, she'd pressed her business card into my hand at the funeral and said, "If you ever need help, anything at all, you call me." I was calling in that promise. Her office was on the 15th floor of a building overlooking downtown Denver, all dark wood and leather furniture that spoke of old money and serious law practice. She'd cleared her morning schedule when I texted her at 3:30 a.m. "Tell me everything," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told her about Thursday evening, about Lily's warning in the car, about the words that had stopped my heart. "We can't go home tonight." I told her about hiding 3 houses down, watching 2 men in work gloves set our home on fire. About Diane's car showing up when she was supposed to be in San Francisco. About that flash of horror on her face when she saw we were alive. Then I showed her the photos. Barbara's expression didn't change as she scrolled through the images on my phone. The burner phone texts. Collateral damage acceptable. The electrical blueprints with Diane's handwriting explaining how to cause an overload. The insurance documents totaling nearly $7 million. But I saw her jaw tighten. Saw the way her fingers gripped the phone just a little harder. "This is attempted murder," she said finally, her voice hard as granite. "Premeditated, calculated attempted murder of you and your child. Plus conspiracy, insurance fraud, arson for hire. Graham, your wife is looking at decades in prison if we can prove this." "If we can prove it," I repeated. "The evidence is strong. Very strong, but..." She set my phone down on the desk between us. "We need more. We need something that leaves no room for reasonable doubt. We need her confession." "How do we get that?" Barbara picked up her office phone. "I know someone who can help. A good man. Someone I trust." 20 minutes later, Detective Carlos Mendoza walked into Barbara's office. He was 49, built like someone who'd played football in high school and still hit the gym regularly. Dark hair graying at the temples, sharp brown eyes that took in everything about me in the first 5 seconds. He wore a suit that had seen better days and carried the air of someone who'd seen too much of humanity's dark side, but hadn't let it make him cynical. "Graham Steele." He extended his hand. "Barbara filled me in on the basics. I need to see what you've got." I handed him my phone. He pulled out a pair of reading glasses and went through every photo methodically, occasionally zooming in on details, his face expressionless. When he finally looked up, he was frowning. "This is good evidence," he said carefully. "Real good. The texts from the burner phone, the blueprints with her handwriting, the insurance policies. This paints a clear picture of intent and planning. We can open an investigation, get warrants, start building a case." But I could hear the "but" coming. But a good defense attorney, and with this much money at stake, she'll have the best could poke holes. The phone was planted. The handwriting analysis isn't conclusive. Those notes were for a completely different project. They'll create doubt. He set my phone down. See, what we need is something that can't be explained away. We need her to tell us in her own words what she did and why. You want a confession, I said. I want a recorded confession. Mendoza leaned forward. Colorado is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. That means if you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it without the other person's knowledge. What I'm suggesting is that you wear a recording device, and confront your wife. Get her to admit what she did. The room felt suddenly cold. Confront her. Just walk up and ask if she tried to kill me. Not quite that direct, Barbara interjected. You'd need to be strategic. Make her think you know enough that denying it is pointless, but not so much that she shuts down completely. It's a delicate balance. It's also dangerous, Mendoza added bluntly. Graham, I won't sugarcoat this. If she realizes what you're doing, if she figures out you're recording her, she could run. Worse, she could panic. People do unpredictable things when they're cornered. I thought about Diane's face at the fire scene. That flash of horror when she'd seen us alive. She'd already proven she was capable of planning our deaths. What would she do if she realized her plan had failed, and we knew about it? I'll have backup close by. Mendoza continued. The moment she confesses, the instant those words come out of her mouth, my team moves in. We arrest her on the spot. You won't be alone with her for more than a few minutes. When would we do this? Tomorrow, Saturday morning. Gives me time to get the equipment ready and brief my team. He looked at me steadily. But Graham, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. You'll be sitting across from your wife, the woman you've been married to for 19 years, and you'll be trying to get her to admit she wanted you and your daughter dead. That takes a special kind of strength. She knows your weaknesses, Barbara added quietly. She knows how to manipulate you, how to make you doubt yourself. You'll need to be absolutely certain you can hold it together. I thought about Lily, about how she'd carried the weight of Diane's threats for 6 months, terrified into silence by a woman who was supposed to protect her, about how my daughter had found the courage to tell me the truth, even though she was afraid I wouldn't believe her. If Lily could be that brave, so could I. I met Mendoza's eyes. I can do this. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. We'll set it up for tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. I'll have you invite her to meet you somewhere public. But private, maybe that coffee shop in Lodo where it's busy enough that she won't suspect anything, but quiet enough for the wire to pick up clear audio. What do I tell her why we're meeting? Tell her you need to talk about next steps. Insurance claims, rebuilding the investigation. Make it sound normal, necessary. Mendoza stood. I'll work out the details and call you tonight with the plan. After he left Barbara, and I sat in silence for a moment. Graham, she said finally, are you sure about this? I looked at her, this woman who'd been like an aunt to me, who'd held my hand at my father's funeral, who was now helping me put my own wife in prison. I'm sure, I said. For Lily, Barbara nodded. For Lily. Friday afternoon, I stood in a small windowless room at Barbara's law office while Detective Mendoza fitted a wire to my chest. The device was smaller than I'd expected, barely the size of a quarter, but it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as he taped it carefully beneath my undershirt, just below my collarbone. The microphone is sensitive. He explained, his fingers working with practiced efficiency. It'll pick up everything within 15 feet. Don't touch it. Don't fidget with your shirt. Act natural. Natural. Right. Because there was something natural about wearing a recording device to entrap your own wife. Barbara sat across from us in a leather chair, watching with the sharp attention of someone who'd spent decades in criminal law. Remember, Graham, the key is to not lead too much. Don't put words in her mouth. Ask open-ended questions. Give her room to talk, and she'll fill that room with truth or lies. Either way, we'll have it on tape. What if she denies everything? I asked, my voice sounding thin even to my own ears. Then we push gently, Barbara said. You mentioned specific details, things only someone involved would know. The burner phone, the blueprints, the insurance amounts. Watch her reaction. She'll either break and confess, or she'll give us enough tells that we can use the physical evidence to build the case anyway. Mendoza stepped back, examining his work. You're all set. The battery will last 6 hours, but this shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. Once she confesses, and Graham, if she confesses, you give us the signal. What signal? Say the phrase, I can't believe this is happening. That's our cue to move in. He pulled out his phone and showed me a map. We'll be in position at the coffee shop by 9:30. I'll have 2 plainclothes officers inside posing as customers. 1 more outside in an unmarked car. The moment you give the signal, we move. I stared at the map. Lodo, lower downtown Denver, was busy on Saturday mornings. The coffee shop Mendoza had chosen was a local place on Larimer Street, busy enough that Diane wouldn't be suspicious about meeting there, but not so crowded we couldn't get a clean recording. What about Lily? I asked. Andrew Walsh, right? Barbara had her reading glasses on, checking notes. Your co-worker. You said you trust him. With my life. With Lily's life. Then she stays with him tomorrow morning. Tell Diane you arranged a play date with his daughter. Keep it normal routine. Nothing that raises red flags. I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Barbara noticed. Graham. She stood and put her hand on my shoulder. I know this is terrifying, but you need to understand something. Diane is going to try to manipulate you. That's what she does. She's had 19 years to learn how to read you, how to push your buttons, how to make you doubt yourself. I know. Do you? Her grip tightened. Because the woman you're going to face tomorrow isn't the woman you married. She might look like her, sound like her, but she's someone who calculated the dollar value of your deaths and decided it was worth it. Don't forget that. No matter what she says, no matter how she cries or begs or tries to explain, don't forget what she did. The words settled into my chest like stones. Mendoza handed me a sheet of paper. I wrote down some questions. Not a script, don't memorize these word for word, but use them as a guide. Start casual. Ask about the flight cancellation. Then gradually work your way toward the hard questions. I scanned the list. Why were you really at the airport? Who did you meet there? What were you planning? And then near the bottom, tell me about Brett. Who's Brett? Mendoza asked, noticing my reaction. The man Lily saw her kissing at the coffee shop 6 months ago, I said. I don't know his last name. Don't even know if Brett is his real name. But he's part of this. He has to be. Good. Mendoza nodded. Use that. Bring him up. See how she reacts. We spent the next 2 hours going over scenarios. What if Diane walked out? What if she got violent? What if she realized I was wearing a wire? Mendoza had answers for everything. Contingency plans stacked on contingency plans. But none of it made me feel better. By the time we finished, the sun was setting outside Barbara's office windows, painting downtown Denver in shades of orange and gold. I felt exhausted, wrung out like I'd already lived through tomorrow and survived it. Go back to the hotel, Barbara said. Try to act normal. Don't give her any reason to suspect. And tomorrow morning, I asked. Tomorrow morning, Mendoza said. You text her around 8. Keep it simple. Hey, can we meet at that coffee shop on Larimer 10 o'clock? I need to talk about next steps. Make it sound routine, boring even. I practiced the message in my head. Casual, normal. The kind of text a husband sends his wife when they're dealing with the aftermath of losing their home. Not the kind of text you send when you're about to destroy her life. That night, I lay awake in the hotel room, staring at the ceiling. Diane was asleep or pretending to be in the bed next to mine. Lily was curled up small in the other bed, her breathing soft and even. At 7:45 a.m., I typed out the message exactly as Mendoza had suggested. Hey, can we meet at that coffee shop on Larimer at 10? I need to talk about insurance stuff and next steps. Just us. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The response came 3 minutes later. Just one word, okay. I stared at that tiny word on my screen. 2 letters that might as well have been a signed confession or a death warrant depending on how tomorrow morning went. I looked over at Lily, still sleeping, her small hand tucked under her cheek. She'd saved us once by being brave enough to tell the truth. Now it was my turn to be brave. My turn to make sure she was safe. My turn to end this. This might be the last night I'd ever think of Diane as my wife. Tomorrow she'd just be the woman who tried to kill us. Graham is about to face Diane wearing a wire, knowing one wrong word could ruin everything. If you're invested, drop a comment sharing your thoughts. I'd love to know you're here. Quick reminder, this narrative includes dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. If that's not your preference, feel free to pause here. Let's see what happens. 10 o'clock, Saturday morning. The coffee shop on Larimer Street was crowded with the weekend brunch crowd, professionals on laptops, couples sharing pastries, the hiss of espresso machines. Normal people doing normal things, unaware that in one corner, booth, a marriage was about to end in handcuffs. Diane sat near the window, gray cardigan over a white blouse, minimal makeup, making her look tired and vulnerable. The grieving wife whose home had burned down. The performance continued. I spotted 2 of Mendoza's officers, a woman at the counter reading a newspaper, a man in a Broncos hoodie near the door. They didn't look at me as I walked past. The wire under my shirt felt like it was burning. Graham, Diane said softly as I sat down. I'm so glad you wanted to meet. Where's Lily? Her first question cutting me off. With Andrew, playdate with Sophie. I kept my voice calm. I thought she needed some normalcy. Something flickered in her eyes. Relief, disappointment. She nodded and reached for her latte. I didn't waste time. Diane, I know everything. Her hand froze halfway to setting down her cup. Know what? I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact. About the burner phone in your car trunk, about the electrical blueprints with your handwriting explaining how to cause an overload, about the $65,000, and I know about Brett. The coffee shop noise seemed to recede. Diane set down her cup carefully, like diffusing a bomb. I don't... She started, then stopped. Graham, I don't know what you think. Don't. Don't lie to me. Not now. Silence stretched between us. Around us, life continued, espresso hissing, someone laughing, a phone buzzing. At our table, everything had stopped. Then Diane sighed, a long, deep exhalation that deflated her entire body. When she looked up, the mask was gone. No more grieving wife. Just her. The real her. You don't understand, she said quietly. Her voice was different now, flatter, harder. You couldn't possibly understand. Then explain it to me. Diane wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. 12 years of failed IVF treatments. Do you have any idea what that does to a body? The hormones, the procedures, the constant disappointment month after month. I said nothing. The wire was recording. And where were you at work? Always at work. Those electrical systems, those blueprints, they were more important than I was. So you had an affair, I said quietly. I met someone who actually saw me. Brett understood me in ways you never did. He listened. He cared about what I needed. And what did you need $7 million? She flinched. It wasn't like that. Not at first. Then how was it? She was quiet for a long moment. Brett told me I deserved better, that I'd sacrificed so much, and what did I have to show for it? A husband who ignored me and... She trailed off. And what? I didn't mean I love Lily. You know I love her. Do I? I pulled out my phone, found the text message photo, and slid it across the table. Because when Brett's people asked about the kid, you said collateral damage acceptable. Diane stared at the screen face, going ashen. That's our daughter. You called our daughter collateral damage. I didn't mean Graham. You have to understand I was desperate. Brett said it was the only way. The insurance money would set us free. Set you free, I corrected. With me and Lily dead. The words hung between us. Final. Undeniable. Diane's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, maybe. I never wanted it to actually happen. I thought something would go wrong with the plan. That maybe you'd be somewhere else. I was going crazy, trapped in this life, with this body that couldn't give us more children, with this husband who loved his work more than his wife. So your solution was to burn us alive, to hire 2 men to set fire to our home while Lily and I slept inside. She was crying harder now, mascara streaking black down her cheeks. People at nearby tables glanced over. The woman at the counter shifted, ready to move. Diane. I needed to hear her say it clearly. Needed the wire to catch every syllable. Did you plan to have me and Lily killed for the insurance money, yes or no? She looked at me with desperation in her eyes. Maybe hoping I'd take it back, that we could work this out somehow. But she must have seen in my face that it was too late. Her voice broke, but the words came through crystal clear. Yes, I did it. I'm sorry, Graham. I was so desperate. I didn't know what else to do. The coffee shop noise rushed back like a wave. Behind me, I heard movement chair scraping footsteps approaching. But I couldn't look away from Diane's face, the woman I'd married 19 years ago. The woman who'd held Lily and cried tears of joy. That woman had just confessed to trying to murder us both. I can't believe this is happening, I said quietly. And just like that, it was over. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a gun. Yes, I did it. I'm sorry, Graham. I was so desperate. Even though I'd known, even though I'd spent the last 24 hours gathering evidence, planning this moment, hearing her say it felt like being hit by a truck. My chest tightened. The coffee shop sounds became muffled, distant. I forced myself to take a breath, to ask the question burning in my mind. Why? My voice came out hoarse. Lily is your daughter. Our daughter. How could you? I couldn't finish the sentence. Diane's face crumpled. More tears streamed down her cheeks. I didn't want to. You have to believe me, Graham. I never wanted it to go that far. Then tell me. I leaned forward, conscious of the wire recording. Tell me how you went from being my wife to hiring someone to burn our daughter alive. She flinched, but nodded. Her hands shook as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. 6 months ago, That coffee shop in Cherry Creek. I wasn't meeting a friend. I was meeting Brett Lawson. We'd been talking online for weeks before that. A Facebook group for people struggling with infertility. He sent me a private message, said he understood. A bitter laugh. I believed him, every word. When did he suggest the plan? Diane closed her eyes. About 3 months ago. We were at his apartment. He'd been thinking about my situation, about how trapped I was, about the life insurance policies. She opened her eyes. He made it sound simple, logical, like the only solution. Solution to what? To everything. The debt. The failed marriage. The life I never wanted. Her voice barely audible. He said if something happened to you, the insurance money would set me free. We could go to Mexico, start over. And Lily. I forced the words out. Where did our daughter fit into this? Diane's face twisted with anguish. I told Brett she couldn't be part of it, that I wouldn't hurt her. But he convinced you. She nodded miserably. He said if Lily survived, she'd be a witness, that she'd become suspicious as she got older, eventually figure it out and turn me in. Diane's voice broke. He called it collateral damage, said if I wanted to be free, I had to let go of everything from my old life, including your own child. He made it sound like there was no other way, like if I backed out, he'd tell you everything anyway. I was trapped. No, I said coldly. You had 1,000 other ways out. Divorce, leaving, but you chose to murder us. You chose to let our daughter burn so you could run away with $7 million. I know. She sobbed. I know it was wrong, but I'm telling you the truth now. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at her, trying to find any trace of the woman who'd held Lily and promised to protect her. That woman was gone. I stood up slowly. I can't believe this is happening. The signal phrase. Around us movement. The woman at the counter was on her feet, hand at her hip. The man in the Broncos hoodie headed toward our table. The back door opened, and Detective Mendoza walked in with 2 uniformed officers. Diane's face went from confusion to shock to betrayal. Graham. She tried to stand, but couldn't. What is this? Mendoza reached our table badge out. Diane Steele, I'm Detective Carlos Mendoza with Denver Police. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, arson, and insurance fraud. No. Her voice was small, childlike. Graham, what did you do? Mrs. Steele, hands behind your back, Mendoza said firmly. You set me up. You wore a wire. Diane's eyes locked on mine. We're married. You can't testify, spousal privilege. Only if I invoke it, I said quietly. I don't. A uniformed officer pulled her arms back. The handcuffs clicked into place, with an echo through the now silent coffee shop. You have the right to remain silent, Mendoza began. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Diane wasn't listening. She stared at me with betrayal mixed with hatred. I loved you, she said, as officers led her away. I know you don't believe that, but I did. Once. You tried to murder our daughter, I replied. That's not love. She opened her mouth to respond, but an officer guided her toward the door. I watched her go, this woman I'd spent nearly 2 decades with now in handcuffs, about to spend her life in prison. The door closed behind her. The silence was deafening. Mendoza turned to me. You okay? I realized my hands were shaking. I reached up and removed the wire from under my shirt tape, pulling at skin. I held out the device. This is the evidence, I said steadily. Her full confession. Everything about Brett Lawson planning the fire, deciding Lily was collateral damage. Mendoza took it carefully. We got everything, Graham. Clear audio. Her admission details about her co-conspirator motive. This is airtight. Brett Lawson, I said. You need to find him. Already on it. We've been looking into the burner phone records. We'll have him in custody before day's end. I nodded numbly. Around us, the coffee shop slowly returned to normal. Mr. Steele. An officer approached. We'll need you at the station for a formal statement. And we'll need your phone, the photos of evidence. Of course. I handed it over. Whatever you need. Mendoza put a hand on my shoulder. You did good today. I know that wasn't easy. I looked toward the door. Make sure she never gets near Lily again. That's all I care about. Make sure my daughter is safe. I give you my word, Mendoza said. With what we have, she's looking at decades. Maybe life. Life. The word should have brought relief. Instead, I felt hollow. My personal phone buzzed. A text from Andrew Walsh. Lily's asking about you. Everything okay? I typed back, on my way. Tell her Daddy will be there in 20 minutes. I looked at Mendoza. Can I go to my daughter? Go, he said gently. We'll contact you later about the statement. I walked out of that coffee shop into the bright Colorado morning, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage and stepping into an uncertain future. But for the first time in days, I could breathe, because Lily was safe. And that was all that mattered. Less than an hour after Diane was taken into custody, Detective Mendoza was already on the move. He'd assembled a tactical team and was heading to Capitol Hill to an address they'd pulled from the burner phone records, Brett Lawson's apartment. I wasn't there for the arrest, but Mendoza told me about it later, and I've replayed the scene in my mind 100 times since. They found Brett in a third-floor walk-up on Emerson Street, one of those old Denver buildings with creaky stairs and thin walls. When the tactical team knocked 3 sharp, authoritative bangs that left no doubt this was law enforcement, Brett made the mistake of hesitating. That half-second pause told them everything they needed to know. Police opened the door. They heard movement inside. Footsteps, then silence. Mr. Lawson, we have a warrant. Open the door or we're coming in. More silence. Then finally, the sound of a deadbolt sliding back. Brett Lawson opened the door looking exactly like a man who knew his world was ending. He was 42 years old, average height, the kind of forgettable face that would blend into any crowd. That was probably his greatest asset as a con man. There was nothing remarkable about him, nothing that would make you remember him or suspect him, except for the half-packed suitcase on the bed behind him. Brett Lawson. Mendoza stepped forward, badge out. I'm Detective Mendoza, Denver Police. We need to talk to you about Diane Steele. Brett's face went carefully neutral. I don't know anyone by that name. Really? Mendoza's voice was dry. That's interesting because we have about 200 text messages between you and her on a burner phone. We also have a recording of Mrs. Steele explaining in detail how you convinced her to murder her husband and daughter for insurance money. The neutrality cracked. Brett's eyes darted to the suitcase, to the door, calculating his chances. Don't even think about it, one of the tactical officers said quietly, hand on his weapon. Brett Lawson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation of murder, and insurance fraud. Mendoza gestured to the officers. Search the place. What they found was damning. In the suitcase, $32,500 in cash, neatly bundled in stacks of hundreds. Exactly half of the $65,000 Brett had promised to pay the arsonists. The other half, presumably, was waiting to be paid after confirmation that Graham and Lily were dead. In a desk drawer, a fake passport under the name Brandon Fletcher, complete with Brett's photo but listing his age as 35 and his place of birth as San Diego. On his laptop, a one-way plane ticket to Las Vegas departing that evening at 7:15 p.m. From there, another ticket to Tijuana, Mexico, and a reservation at a resort in Cabo San Lucas for 2 people checking in Monday morning. Brett had been hours away from disappearing. At the station, Brett initially stuck to his denials. He didn't know Diane. He'd never been to Cherry Creek. The money was his savings. The fake passport was just something he'd bought as a joke years ago. Then Mendoza played the recording from the coffee shop. Diane's voice clear as a bell through the interrogation room speakers. "Brett told me I deserved better. He said if something happened to you, the insurance money would set me free. We could go to Mexico, start over. And later, he called it collateral damage. He said if I really wanted to be free, I had to be willing to let go of everything from my old life." Brett's face went white. "Still don't know her?" Mendoza asked mildly. Brett's lawyer, a public defender who'd been assigned 30 minutes earlier, leaned over and whispered urgently in his ear. When Brett looked up again, the fight had gone out of him. "I want a deal." "A deal." Mendoza leaned back in his chair. "You tried to have a 10-year-old girl burned alive. Why would I give you a deal? Because I can give you the guys who were actually going to do it." Brett's voice was flat now, all pretense gone. "The 2 men who set the fire. I know their names. I know where they are. And I can prove I hired them." Mendoza and his partner exchanged glances. Then Mendoza pulled out a notepad. "Talk." Brett talked. The arsonists were Danny Ward, 31, and Craig Donnelly, 29. Small-time criminals Brett had met through his gambling connections. Ward had a record for assault and property damage. Donnelly had done time for arson for hire back in 2018. They were exactly the kind of desperate, amoral men you'd hire to burn down a house with people inside. Brett had approached them 2 weeks before the fire offered them $65,000 to handle a problem. Half up front, half after. They'd asked if anyone would be home. Brett had told them yes, but that it needed to look like an accident, an electrical fire, something the insurance company wouldn't question. "And the little girl?" Mendoza asked. "You told them there'd be a child in the house." Brett looked down at the table. "I told them collateral damage was acceptable." The words, the same words Diane had used because Brett had taught them to her, hung in the air like poison. "Why?" Mendoza's voice was hard now. "Why target the Steele family specifically?" Brett laughed a bitter sound. "I owed money, a lot of money. Gambling debts to people you don't want to owe money to. I needed a score, and I needed it fast. So you found a vulnerable woman and manipulated her into murdering her own family." "I found a woman who was already unhappy," Brett corrected, "who already felt trapped, who already resented her husband. I just showed her a way out by weaponizing her infertility struggles." "It wasn't a question." Brett shrugged. "She made it easy. All I had to do was listen and sympathize. Tell her she deserved better. Make her believe I was the answer to all her problems. Women like Diane, they're desperate for someone to see them, to validate them. Once you have that emotional hook, the rest is simple." Mendoza stood abruptly, disgusted. "Get him out of my sight. Process him and put him in holding." My phone rang at 3:47 p.m. that Saturday afternoon. I was sitting on a bench outside Andrew's house watching Lily play with Sophie in the backyard. They were blowing bubbles, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Normal. Innocent. Alive. Graham, it's Mendoza. Did you get him? We got him. Brett Lawson is in custody. He's already given us everything names evidence the whole conspiracy. We've issued warrants for Danny Ward and Craig Donnelly. With what Brett gave us, we'll have them by tonight. I felt something loosen in my chest. Something that had been wound tight since Thursday night. So it's over. The arrest's not quite. We still need to pick up Ward and Donnelly. But the investigation. Yeah, Graham, it's over. We have everyone. Diane's confessed Brett's cooperating, and we have enough evidence to put them all away for decades. A pause. Lily is completely safe now. That's what you wanted to know, right? Yeah. My voice came out rough. That's what I wanted to know. After we hung up, I stayed on that bench just breathing, letting it sink in. It was over. My daughter was safe, and the weight I'd been carrying since Thursday night, the fear, the vigilance, the constant calculation of how to protect Lily from her own mother, finally lifted. 4 weeks later, I sat in the Denver District Court, trying to comprehend how my life had brought me here. The courtroom smelled of old wood and polish with high ceilings that made every sound echo, formal, imposing. Diane sat at the defendant's table flanked by court-appointed attorneys. She wore an Orange County jail jumpsuit that washed out her complexion and made her look 10 years older than the woman I'd confronted a month ago. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing left of the polished facade. She looked small, diminished. But I couldn't let myself feel sympathy. The gallery was packed with reporters and onlookers. Barbara Grant sat behind me, a steady presence. Lily wasn't here, she was, with Andrew's family being a kid. That was what mattered. Judge Patricia Williams entered, and we all rose. The bailiff announced, "The State of Colorado versus Diane Marie Steele. Charges of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, attempted murder in the first degree, arson in the first degree, and insurance fraud." Each charge landed like a hammer blow. The prosecutor stood Jessica Ramirez, sharp-eyed and methodical. "Your Honor, the state will show that the defendant conspired with her lover Brett Lawson to murder her husband Graham Steele and her 10-year-old daughter Lily Steele. The motive was financial, approximately $6.25 million in life insurance." The courtroom monitor flickered to life. Evidence photos appeared, the burner phone, text messages, blueprints with Diane's handwriting. The defendant didn't just agree to this plan. She actively participated. She provided detailed instructions on how to sabotage the electrical system. She agreed that her own daughter's death was, quote, collateral damage acceptable. A murmur rippled through the gallery. On the screen, they played the coffee shop audio. My voice. "Did you plan to have me and Lily killed for the insurance money?" Diane's voice clear despite tears. "Yes, I did it. I'm sorry, Graham. I was so desperate." Silence. Ramirez continued. "The defendant has indicated she wishes to enter a plea. The state has agreed to remove the death penalty in exchange for a guilty plea to all charges." Judge Brown looked at Diane. "Mrs. Steele, you understand that by pleading guilty, you're waiving your right to a trial." Diane stood wobbling. "Yes, Your Honor." "How do you plead?" A long pause. Then, "Guilty, Your Honor, to all charges." The gallery erupted in whispers. Judge Brown banged her gavel. "We'll proceed to sentencing, but first arguments regarding mitigating circumstances." Diane's defense attorney, Robert Smith, stood. "Your Honor, my client suffered 11 years of failed fertility treatments. The physical and emotional toll was immense. She was vulnerable, isolated, and that vulnerability was exploited by Brett Lawson, a career criminal who specifically targeted her. He displayed documents. Mr. Lawson has a history of targeting wealthy, emotionally vulnerable women. Mrs. Steele was manipulated, groomed into believing this was her only escape. Ramirez cut in sharply. Your Honor, the defense wants you to see Mrs. Steele as a victim. She's not. Yes, Brett Lawson manipulated her. But at every step, Diane Steele had choices. And most damningly, she pointed at the screen showing Diane's handwritten notes on electrical blueprints. She chose to sit down and detail exactly how to burn down her home with her family inside. Ramirez's voice rose. The defendant drew these diagrams herself. She used her husband's work plans designed to keep their family safe and turned them into a murder weapon. When asked about her daughter, she didn't say no. She said collateral damage was acceptable. The words hit like blows. Diane flinched with each one. This wasn't a momentary lapse. This was months of planning. Months of lying. Months of looking her daughter in the eye, knowing she'd ordered that child's death. That's not someone who deserves leniency. Judge Brown made notes. I'll take these arguments under consideration. We'll recess until tomorrow for testimony from investigating officers. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. I watched bailiffs lead Diane away. She looked back, once eyes finding mine. I saw something there, regret maybe. Or just realization there was no going back. I turned away first. Outside, Mendoza caught up with me. Tomorrow I testify. You don't have to be there. I'll be there, I said. For Lily. Mendoza nodded. For Lily. I drove back to our rental in Highlands Ranch in silence. Small, temporary, but safe. Clean. Ours. When I arrived, Andrew had already dropped Lily off. She was doing homework, backpack spilled across the floor. Daddy! She jumped up and hugged me. I held her tight, breathing in strawberry shampoo. Hey, sweetheart. How was school? Good. We learned about fractions. They're weird. I laughed, despite everything. Yeah, they are. She pulled back, looking up with serious eyes. Was it bad today, at court? I'd promised to tell her age-appropriate truth. It was hard, but it's almost over. Soon we can stop thinking about this and just start over. She nodded solemnly. A new beginning. A new beginning, I confirmed. Just you and me, kid. We're going to be okay. And for the first time in weeks, I actually believed it. The second week began with a ghost taking the witness stand. Brian Paul Fletcher adjusted his microphone with practiced ease, the kind of calm that comes from years of lying professionally. The man we'd known as Brett Lawson no longer existed, dissolved into court records, showing 3 active federal warrants across California, Arizona, and Nevada. 7 years of fraud, dozens of victims, and now 20 years in federal prison in exchange for every detail. The prosecutor wasted no time. How did you identify Mrs. Steele as a potential target? Fletcher's answer came smooth as silk. Social media reconnaissance, Mrs. Steele maintained an active presence on infertility support forums, extremely vulnerable demographic. Her LinkedIn profile identified her husband's position at Denver Power Systems. Public property records showed their Cherry Creek address and approximate home value. Life insurance databases are surprisingly accessible if you know where to look. He described hunting my wife the way an accountant might discuss portfolio diversification. Walk us through your approach. I joined a Facebook grief counseling group under a fabricated identity, someone who'd experienced child loss and understood their pain. 3 months of building rapport through private messages, shared vulnerabilities, manufactured connection. When I suggested meeting in person, she agreed immediately. The coffee shop. 6 months ago. Everything Lily had witnessed suddenly clicked into sharper focus. Mr. Fletcher, had you attempted this particular scheme before? His expression didn't change. 3 times prior to Mrs. Steele. The gallery stirred. Judge Patricia Morrison let the moment breathe before allowing the prosecutor to continue. Please describe these previous attempts. What followed felt like watching someone dissect human desperation with clinical precision. Jennifer Martinez, Phoenix, summer of 2019, married to a commercial real estate developer, 5 consecutive IVF failures. Family relationships deteriorated. Fletcher had spent 4 months building trust, introducing fantasies of freedom, hinting at financial escape routes. When he finally suggested staging her husband's death as an accident, she'd recoiled immediately, threatened to contact authorities. Rebecca Huang, San Diego, fall of 2021. Wife of a software executive, 8 years of fertility treatments, crushing medical debt. Same methodical grooming. Same slow escalation. But when Fletcher outlined the full plan, including her 12-year-old stepson's elimination as a potential witness, she'd recorded their conversation and delivered it to the police. Amanda Richardson, Scottsdale, spring of 2022, surgeon's spouse, multiple late-term pregnancy losses, psychiatric medications. She'd wavered longer than the others, almost committed, until the moment Fletcher casually mentioned her 7-year-old daughter couldn't survive either. She'd walked away, shaking, when 3 intelligent women, the prosecutor emphasized, who refused the moment they understood children would be murdered. Affirmative. Yet Diane Steele proceeded. Without hesitation. Those 2 words detonated like grenades in the silent courtroom. I felt dozens of eyes pivot toward the defense table where Diane sat rigid, staring at nothing. Mr. Fletcher, Detective Mendoza recovered a second mobile device from your residence during your arrest. Can you identify it? The prosecutor held up an evidence bag containing a cheap flip phone. My operational phone, for coordinating with contractors. Contractors. The prosecutor's tone dripped contempt. You mean the arsonists? Correct. Detective Mendoza will now read selected messages from September 14th. Mendoza stood, cleared his throat. Target 4 confirmed viable. Total payout approximately $8 million. Primary transfer scheduled September 30th. Secondary accounts established offshore. Relocation to Las Vegas pending final confirmation. The courtroom detonated into chaos. But cutting through every other sound came Diane's voice, shattered, ragged, drowning in betrayal. You lied! She was standing, trembling, face contorted. You said you loved. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked 3 times. Ms. Steele, control yourself. Diane couldn't hear her, couldn't hear anything except the collapse of every fantasy she'd constructed. I trusted you, I believed everything you... Her voice fractured completely. She crumpled back into her chair, hands covering her face, body convulsing with sobs. Her attorney gripped her shoulder, whispering urgent instructions, but Diane had disappeared into the wreckage of her choices. She'd finally understood the truth. She'd sacrificed her family for an illusion spun by a professional predator. I should have felt satisfaction watching her world disintegrate. Should have felt vindicated seeing her recognize exactly how completely she'd been manipulated and used. Instead, I felt something emptier, sadder, not forgiveness that remained impossible probably forever, but profound pity for someone who'd been so desperate to escape her pain that she'd convinced herself murder was acceptable, who'd chosen a stranger's promises over her daughter's life. Judge Morrison called recess. Guards approached to escort Diane back to holding. She never looked up, never tried to meet anyone's eyes, just let them lead her away, shoulders curved inward, broken by the weight of understanding that she'd destroyed everything real for something that never existed at all. The hardest moment we'd face wasn't behind us. It waited ahead in the form of a 10-year-old girl who'd have to tell a room full of strangers exactly what her mother had done to her. I'd held Lily's hand through breakfast that morning, through the silent car ride to the courthouse, through the security checkpoint, and the long walk down the marble corridor. Her palm stayed small and damp in mine, trembling occasionally like a captured bird. Barbara had prepared her as gently as possible, explained what the courtroom would look like, who would be there, what kinds of questions the prosecutor might ask. Lily had nodded solemnly through it, all her expression far too serious for someone who should still believe in fairy tales. "You don't have to do this." I'd told her the night before, kneeling so we were eye to eye. "If it's too hard, if you're too scared, we can find another way." But Lily had shaken her head with a resolve that broke my heart. "Daddy, I need to tell them, so they know it's real." Now watching the bailiff adjust the witness chair so her feet wouldn't dangle quite so far from the floor, I wanted to grab her and run. Wanted to tell Judge Morrison that my daughter had been through enough, that making her relive this nightmare in front of dozens of watching eyes was cruel and unnecessary. But Lily had asked to testify, had insisted on it. So I stayed in my seat, Barbara's hand steady on my shoulder, and watched my daughter become the bravest person I'd ever known. "Hi, Lily." The prosecutor's voice was impossibly gentle. "Can you tell us your full name, Lily Marie Steele?" Her voice came out small but clear. "I'm 10 years old." "Lily, I know this is scary, but you're doing great. Can you tell the court about last summer, about what you saw at the coffee shop?" Lily's hands twisted in her lap. She glanced at me once. I nodded encouragement, then took a shaky breath. "I saw Mommy kissing a man who wasn't Daddy at the Cherry Creek coffee shop. She told me after that it was just a friend, but she made me promise not to tell. She said..." Lily's voice cracked. "She said if I told it would break our family, that Daddy would leave and it would be all my fault." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Judge Morrison silenced them with a look. "Did your mother say anything else about keeping secrets?" Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. "I wrote about it in my diary, about being scared and confused. Mommy found it and..." She paused, swallowing hard. "She tore out all the pages, burned them in the fireplace. She told me that some secrets have to stay buried forever or terrible things happen." "What kind of terrible things?" "She said Daddy would stop loving me, that I'd be alone, that grown-ups don't believe little girls who tell tales." Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. "She said no one would ever believe me over her." The courtroom had gone absolutely silent. Even the stenographer had stopped typing, frozen in the moment. "Lily," the prosecutor said softly, "you were very brave to tell your daddy the truth that night. You saved both of your lives. Do you understand that?" Lily nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "No further questions, Your Honor." The defense attorney stood but barely managed 2 steps forward before Judge Morrison cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Counselor, if you're planning to cross-examine this child, I suggest you reconsider very carefully." He sat back down. Judge Morrison looked at Diane, whose face had gone ashen behind the defense table. "Ms. Steele, you have the right to make a final statement before sentencing. Do you wish to exercise that right?" For a long moment I thought Diane would refuse, would sit in defiant silence the way she had through most of the trial. But then she stood, turned to face the witness stand where our daughter sat small and exhausted. "Lily." Diane's voice broke on the name. "Baby, She stopped fighting for control. "I am so sorry for everything I did to you. For every lie I told, every threat I made, every time I made you feel small and scared and alone." Tears streamed down her face. "You deserved a mother who protected you, who loved you more than anything else in the world. and instead you got me a monster who was willing to—" She couldn't finish. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But I need you to know that none of this was ever your fault. None of it. You are brave and good and everything I should have been." Diane looked at Judge Morrison. "I have no excuse. No explanation that matters. I made a choice to value money and fantasy over my daughter's life, and I will spend every remaining day of my existence trying to understand how I became someone capable of that." Judge Morrison's expression remained neutral as Diane sat back down. "Thank you, Ms. Steele." She consulted her notes. "The court has reviewed all evidence testimony and victim impact statements. The crimes committed here represent a profound betrayal of trust and a callous disregard for human life, particularly the life of a vulnerable child." She looked directly at Diane. "Diane Marie Steele, you are hereby sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without possibility of parole for conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, attempted murder, arson, and insurance fraud." Diane closed her eyes. "Brian Paul Fletcher, 35 years federal prison. Danny Ward and Craig Donnelly, 25 years each Colorado State Prison." Judge Morrison's gavel fell. "This court is adjourned." I moved before the sound faded, crossing to the witness stand, where Lily sat frozen, overwhelmed. I lifted her down, gathered her small body against my chest. "It's over, sweetheart," I whispered into her hair. "We're safe now. We're safe." Barbara guided us through the crowd, past the cameras and reporters shouting questions out into the brilliant Denver sunshine. The afternoon light felt impossibly bright after 3 weeks in that dim courtroom. Lily raised her face to the sun, eyes closed, breathing deep. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby. Can we go home now?" I kissed the top of her head. "Yeah, we can go home. Not to the house that burned. That was gone forever along with the life we'd lived there, but home to whatever came next. To safety, to healing, to the long, slow work of becoming whole again. Together, 30 years. Justice served. But the real healing is just beginning for Graham and Lily. If you've made it this far, drop a comment sharing what you're feeling. Your perspective matters. Gentle reminder, certain elements are dramatized. If this style doesn't resonate, feel free to explore other content. Let's see what comes next. 6 months had passed since Judge Morrison's gavel fell. We were residents of Highlands Ranch now, living in a 3-bedroom ranch house with a backyard that caught morning sunlight and faced a cul-de-sac where kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. The house was smaller than what we'd lost. No vaulted ceilings, no chef's kitchen, no master suite with mountain views. But it was filled with something our old house had never quite managed: peace. The legal paperwork had finalized 3 weeks ago. Divorce decree signed, custody granted entirely to me, Diane's parental rights effectively suspended for the duration of her incarceration. 30 years meant Lily would be 40 before her mother walked free, a timeline so distant it felt almost abstract. Diane wrote occasionally. Letters arrived every few weeks, forwarded through Barbara's office per the court-ordered communication restrictions. I kept them in a sealed box in the garage, unopened. Lily knew they existed, but had never asked to read them. Maybe someday she would. Maybe not. That would be her choice to make when she was ready. For now, we focused on healing. Dr. Karen Reynolds had become a fixture in our weekly routine, a child psychologist Barbara had recommended, who specialized in family trauma. Every Tuesday afternoon, I drive Lily to the small office in Littleton, with the fish tank in the waiting room and the shelf full of art supplies. The first few sessions, Lily had barely spoken, just sat hunched in the oversized armchair, picking at the seam of a throw pillow while Dr. Reynolds asked gentle questions that went mostly unanswered. But gradually, incrementally, my daughter had started to emerge from the shell she'd built around herself. Last month, I'd heard her laugh, really laugh, the kind that comes from the belly and lights up everything for the first time since the fire. She'd been playing with our neighbor's golden retriever, throwing a tennis ball that the dog kept bringing back with increasingly dramatic displays of enthusiasm. The sound had stopped me in my tracks, frozen me with a gratitude so overwhelming I'd had to turn away and blink hard against the sudden burning in my eyes. 2 weeks ago, she'd asked to join her school's softball team. I'd been nervous, worried the pressure, the social dynamics, the possibility of failure might set her back. But Dr. Reynolds had encouraged it. Normalcy is healing, she'd said. Let her be a kid again. So now Tuesday evenings meant practice at the fields behind Dakota Ridge Elementary, where Lily played second base with fierce determination and had made a best friend named Chloe, who shared her obsession with collecting colorful hair ties. I'd reorganized my entire life around being present for hers, turned down a promotion that would have required frequent travel to project sites across the Southwest, implemented a strict boundary home by 6 every evening, no exceptions. My team at Denver Power Systems had adjusted, respecting the new parameters, even if they didn't know all the details behind them. Andrew Walsh had been invaluable through everything, covering for me when I needed to attend court hearings, never once prying into the specifics of why my family had imploded so spectacularly. His daughter Sophie remained Lily's closest school friend, and their weekly playdates had become anchors of stability. Barbara checked in monthly, ostensibly to review legal matters, but really just to make sure we were managing. She'd become more than our attorney. She was family now in all the ways that mattered. The community had surrounded us without being asked. Neighbors brought casseroles those first few weeks. The PTA moms made sure Lily got invited to birthday parties and included in carpool rotations. My co-workers organized a discretionary fundraiser that covered the first 6 months of Dr. Reynolds' fees. People had been kinder than I'd ever expected strangers to be. Tonight, after softball practice and showers and a dinner of spaghetti that Lily had helped make, we sat together on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Shanadil? Her voice was quiet, thoughtful. Yeah, sweetheart. Why did Mommy do it? The question I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure for 6 months. I pulled her closer against my side, choosing my words carefully. Mommy got lost, Lily. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense because they're in so much pain they can't see clearly anymore. She convinced herself that leaving that all of it would make things better, but she was wrong. Was it because of me? The question came out small, fragile. No. I turned her to face me, needing her to see my eyes, to understand the absolute truth of what I was saying. None of this was ever because of you. You didn't cause it, and you couldn't have stopped it. What Mommy did was about her own choices, her own pain, not yours. Lily nodded, slowly, processing. But you know what you did do, I continued. You were the bravest person I've ever known. You told the truth, even though you were scared. You trusted me even when Mommy tried to make you doubt. You saved both of our lives, Lily. You saved us. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Are we going to be okay, Daddy? I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay. And for the first time in 6 months, I believed it completely. The road ahead would be long years of therapy, difficult conversations, moments when the past would resurface in unexpected ways. But sitting there in the gathering dusk with my daughter safe beside me, I could finally see a future that looked like hope. We'd survived the worst thing imaginable. Everything after this was just learning to live again. 2 years had passed since the trial. Lily was 12 now, thriving in 7th grade, captain of her softball team, honor roll student. From the outside, we looked like a success story. A resilient, single-father household that had moved past tragedy. But healing, I'd learned, never followed straight lines. Tuesday afternoons still meant Dr. Reynolds's office. This particular Tuesday started normally, until Dr. Reynolds opened the door after only 30 minutes, her expression carefully neutral. "Graham, Lily has asked if you could join us. Is that okay?" My stomach dropped. Lily requesting my presence mid-session was unprecedented. Inside, my daughter sat curled on the therapy couch, knees pulled up, refusing to meet my eyes. "Lily has something important to share," Dr. Reynolds said gently. "Whenever you're ready, Lily." My daughter stared at the abstract painting on the wall, took 3 deliberate breaths. "Daddy, I need to tell you something about that night. The fire." Her voice was steady but small. "Something I haven't been completely honest about." Every protective instinct went on alert. "I'm listening, sweetheart." "You remember how I told you I heard Mommy on the phone that day about the bad men and burning the house?" "I remember." Everyone thought I'd just found out, that it was new. She finally looked at me, anguish in her eyes. "I knew for 6 months, Daddy. Not just that day, 6 whole months." The room tilted. 6 months. Half a year. I overheard them at our house." Lily continued, words pouring out now. "Mommy had Brett over when you were at a Colorado Springs job site. I came home early from Sophie's. I heard them in the kitchen talking about insurance money, about making it look like an accident. Brett said you and I were obstacles to their happiness that could be removed cleanly." Her hands shook. Dr. Reynolds passed her a stress ball. I ran upstairs and threw up. Then Mommy came up and she knew I'd heard. She told me I'd misunderstood, that Brett was playing a game, that if I told you, you'd think I was crazy, that you'd send me away. "Lily, I would never." She kept saying it, Daddy, every time we were alone. "If you tell Daddy, he'll think you're making it up for attention. He'll send you to a hospital. They'll give you medication that makes you forget your own name." My hands clenched. Rage at Diane threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to stay present. She made me feel like keeping the secret was my responsibility. Lily said through tears that if something bad happened, it would be my fault for not staying quiet. She checked my phone constantly. Read my diary, that's how she knew about the coffee shop kiss. She said if I kept writing my paranoid thoughts, she'd have proof I needed psychiatric help. "Gaslighting," Dr. Reynolds confirmed quietly. "Your mother systematically undermined your reality and made you doubt your own perceptions. It's a particularly insidious form of child abuse." I repeated the timeline, incomprehensible. "You carried that alone for 6 months. I tried to tell you so many times," Lily's voice broke. "But I'd hear Mommy's voice saying I was lying, that I'd ruin everything, that you'd hate me. I couldn't risk losing you, Daddy." I pulled her into my arms. "You could never lose me, Lily. Never. Not for telling the truth, not for being scared, not for anything." She sobbed deep, shuddering cries from a well of pain she'd carried alone for 2 years. After several minutes, Dr. Reynolds spoke. "Lily, you've shown tremendous courage today. Graham, do you have questions?" "Why now?" I asked, still holding my daughter. "Why tell me today?" Lily pulled back, wiping her face. "Because Dr. Reynolds helped me understand that keeping the secret meant Mommy was still controlling me. And because I wanted you to know, when I finally told you that night in the car, it wasn't because I'd just found out. It was because I'd finally gotten brave enough to stop letting Mommy's voice win." The pieces rearranged themselves. That night, Lily hadn't been delivering new information in panic. She'd been breaking free of 6 months of psychological imprisonment. You weren't just warning me," I said slowly. You were escaping. Both, Lily whispered. I was doing both. What Lily experienced is coercive control, Dr. Reynolds explained. Diane weaponized your daughter's love for you, turned it into a tool for silencing her. That kind of manipulation leaves scars that take years to heal. And you've been dealing with guilt all this time. I looked at Lily, thinking you should have told me sooner. She nodded miserably. Listen to me, I cupped her face. You were 10 years old, a child being psychologically tortured by someone who was supposed to protect you. The fact that you survived it, that you found courage to speak when it mattered most, that makes you the bravest person I've ever known. But if I'd told you earlier, then Diane would have convinced me you were struggling mentally, and we might not be here now. Your timing saved us, Lily. Your instinct to wait until you had proof, that's what kept us alive. Dr. Reynolds nodded. Survivor's guilt is completely normal, but practice replacing I should have with I survived. You didn't fail by waiting. You succeeded by choosing the moment when speaking up would be heard. Something shifted in Lily's expression. Not instant relief healing didn't work that way, but the beginning of permission to let it go. I don't think I'm ready to forgive myself yet, she said quietly. That's okay, I told her. We've got time, all the time in the world. We spent the remaining minutes discussing journaling exercises and strategies for managing guilt. As we left, Lily slipped her hand into mine, something she hadn't done in public for over a year. Daddy. Yeah, sweetheart. Thank you for not being mad. I crouched to eye level. Lily Marie Steele, I am never going to be mad at you for being hurt by someone else. That's not how love works. Okay. She nodded, tears bright. Okay. And for the record, I pulled her into one more hug. You're my hero. Then now always. We drove home in comfortable silence, the late afternoon sun warming the car. Lily texted Chloe about homework. I mentally rearranged dinner plans. Normal, healing, moving forward, but different now. Built on complete truth instead of partial understanding. The road ahead still stretched long, more therapy, more moments when the past would surface. But we'd walk it together, with no more secrets between us. And that was what real healing looked like. That night after Lily had gone to bed, I found myself standing in her doorway, watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, curled on her side, stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, the nightlight casting gentle shadows across her face. 12 years old and still my baby girl, even as she grew into someone I sometimes barely recognized. Dr. Reynolds had mentioned something during our session that kept echoing. Children who experience coercive control often develop coping mechanisms, journals, drawings, ways of processing what they can't speak aloud. I'd seen Lily writing in notebooks before, assumed it was homework or stories or the typical preteen diary entries about crushes and friend drama. But now I wondered. Moving quietly, I crossed to her bed and knelt beside it. The space beneath was cluttered with the usual detritus of childhood shoeboxes, old books, a forgotten soccer ball, and there pushed far back against the wall, a purple notebook with a unicorn sticker on the cover. I hesitated. Reading a child's diary felt like a profound violation of trust, but Lily had shared her secret today, had opened the door to understanding. Maybe this was part of that journey, letting me see the full scope of what she'd endured alone. I carefully slid the notebook out and carried it to the living room. The first entry was dated 8 months before the fire, 2 months after Diane met Brett at that coffee shop. I saw Mommy kissing the man again today, at Starbucks on University. She didn't see me. I was with Sophie getting smoothies next door. My stomach feels sick all the time now. I don't know what to do. The handwriting was childish, uncertain. Some words misspelled. The work of a 10-year-old trying to make sense of something far beyond her comprehension. I turned the page. Mommy asked if I told Daddy about Starbucks. I said no. She said good because it would break Daddy's heart and ruin our family. She said some things are better kept quiet. I think she's right, but I feel bad lying. Page after page chronicled Lily's descent into confusion and fear. Entries about overhearing fragments of phone conversations, about Diane checking her backpack and reading her texts, about the growing sense that something terrible was building. Then the entry from 6 months before the fire. I heard Mommy and the man Brett. I think that's his name talking in the kitchen. They said words like insurance money and accident and obstacles. Brett said Daddy and me were in the way. Mommy said she couldn't hurt us, but Brett laughed. He said, cleanly removed. I threw up after. Mommy knew I heard. She came to my room and said I misunderstood, that it was a game. But her eyes were scary. My hands trembled holding the page. Mommy keeps checking my phone now. She reads my diary, my other one, the one she knows about. She says if I tell Daddy anything, he won't believe me. That he'll think I'm crazy and send me away to a hospital where they make kids forget things. I'm so scared all the time. I want to tell Daddy, but what if she's right? What if he doesn't believe me? Tears blurred the words. I had to stop reading, press my palms against my eyes, breathe through the rage and heartbreak choking me. My daughter, my 10-year-old daughter, had written these words while living under the same roof as a woman planning to murder us both. I forced myself to continue. Sophie's mom asked why I look sad all the time. I almost told her. Almost. But then Mommy picked me up, and the whole ride home she talked about how families keep secrets, how some things would destroy us if anyone knew, how I'm the only one who can protect us by staying quiet. I think she meant protect her, not us. The entries became shorter, more desperate as the months passed. Evidence of a child slowly breaking under psychological torture. Then the entry that shattered me completely. I don't want to lose Daddy, but I don't want Mommy to go to jail either. Even if she's planning something bad, she's still my mommy. I wish I could make her stop without anyone getting hurt. I wish I knew what to do. I'm just a kid. This isn't fair. I closed the notebook, set it carefully on the coffee table, and let myself cry, for the weight Lily had carried alone, for the impossible choice she'd felt forced to make, for the childhood stolen by a mother's cruelty, but also for her strength, for the courage it took to finally speak up, despite 6 months of manipulation telling her to stay silent. My daughter was the bravest person I'd ever known. And she needed to hear that, not just spoken aloud, but in words she could return to whenever doubt crept back. I found paper and pen settled at the kitchen table and began to write. My dearest Lily, I read your journal tonight. I hope you'll forgive me for looking without asking, but after today's session, I needed to understand the full picture of what you survived. First, I am so proud of you. Not for keeping quiet, you don't need to be proud of surviving abuse. I'm proud of how you finally found the courage to speak despite everything working against you. Second, none of this was ever your fault. Not Mommy's choices, not the fire, not the 6 months of carrying that terrible secret. You were a child being manipulated by an adult who should have protected you. The blame belongs entirely to her, never to you. Third, you will never lose me. Not by telling the truth, not by being scared, not by being human. My love for you isn't conditional on you being perfect or brave or quiet. It's just love, complete, unconditional, forever. Fourth, I understand now why you wrote, I don't want Mommy to go to jail. That line broke my heart, because it shows your beautiful, compassionate spirit even when you were terrified. You wanted to save everyone, even someone hurting you. That's not weakness, sweetheart. That's extraordinary grace. You are my hero. You were then carrying that impossible burden alone. You are now choosing to trust me with the full truth. You will always be my hero no matter what. We're going to be okay, Lily. We're going to keep healing together one day at a time. And you never have to be alone in your pain again. All my love forever and always, Daddy. I folded the letter carefully, walked back to Lily's room, and tucked it under her pillow where she'd find it in the morning. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. Just pulled her rabbit closer and sighed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More therapy, more processing, more moments when the past demanded attention. But tonight, I'd given my daughter something she desperately needed: confirmation that her truth mattered, that her feelings were valid, that she was loved exactly as she was. And sometimes that was enough. 3 years had passed since that desperate night at Denver International Airport. 3 years since a 10-year-old girl had whispered 5 words that saved both our lives. Mommy is going to kill you. Now that girl was 13, sitting cross-legged in our backyard on a warm Friday afternoon, oiling her softball glove with the focused concentration of someone who took her sport seriously. Her hair had darkened, slightly grown longer. She'd shot up 3 inches in the past year alone, all gangly limbs and emerging adolescence. But it was the light in her eyes that marked the real transformation. The haunted look had faded. Not disappeared completely, trauma didn't work that way. But most days now, Lily looked like exactly what she was. A normal 13-year-old worried about algebra homework and whether Chloe would sit with her at lunch, and if that boy from science class really did like her, or if Sophie was just making things up. Dad, you're doing it wrong. Lily's voice pulled me back to the present. I looked down at the softball I'd been holding, realizing I'd somehow managed to grip it for a curveball instead of the fastball she'd asked me to throw. Sorry, sweetheart. Lost in thought. I adjusted my grip, wound up, and sent the ball sailing toward where she knelt with her glove ready. She caught it with the satisfying pop of leather on leather, grinned. Better, again. We'd been doing this every Friday for the past year, our daddy-daughter days that Dr. Reynolds had suggested as a way to build positive memories alongside processing the traumatic ones. I'd negotiated with Denver Power Systems to shift to a 4-day work week, taking Fridays off to be fully present for Lily. Some weeks we went hiking in the foothills. Others we caught matinees at the AMC. Today was backyard softball practice, followed by pizza and whatever movie Lily picked. Simple, normal, healing. How was school this week? I asked, throwing another pitch. Lily caught it, threw it back. Pretty good. Got an A on my history presentation about the suffragettes, Mrs. Palmer said it was one of the best she'd seen. Pride colored her voice, the healthy kind that came from genuine accomplishment, not the desperate need for validation that used to drive her. That's fantastic, Lil. I'm so proud of you. She smiled, then grew thoughtful. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think... She paused, choosing words carefully. The nightmares are basically gone now, right? Like I haven't had one in 2 months. It was true. The night terrors that had plagued her for the first year, waking, screaming about fire, about her mother's voice, about being trapped, had gradually diminished. The previous year, they'd come weekly, then monthly. Now rarely at all. That's real progress, sweetheart. You've worked so hard in therapy. Dr. Reynolds says I'm ready to move to monthly sessions instead of weekly, that I've developed good coping mechanisms and support systems. Lily caught another throw, held the ball for a moment. I think she's right. I feel different, stronger. I lowered my glove, studying her. She sat straighter now, spoke with more confidence, made eye contact without flinching. The girl who'd once apologized for existing had grown into a young woman who knew her own worth. You are stronger. You were always strong, Lily. But now you believe it. She ducked her head pleased, but still learning to accept compliments without deflection. Another mark of progress. We practiced for another 30 minutes, falling into the comfortable rhythm of throw and catch, the late afternoon sun warm on our shoulders. Somewhere down the street, kids played basketball. A lawnmower hummed. Dogs barked. The mundane symphony of suburban peace. Finally, Lily called it. I'm getting hungry. Pizza time. Lou Malnati's or Pizzeria Locale. Lou Malnati's. Deep dish with sausage and mushrooms. We headed inside, ordered online, then settled on the couch while we waited. Lily scrolled through Netflix options, making the kinds of elaborate arguments only teenagers can about why we absolutely needed to watch some show I'd never heard of. But halfway through her passionate defense of whatever anime had captured her attention this week, she stopped, set down the remote, turned to face me with an expression I'd learned to recognize something important brewing. Dad, I've been thinking about something else Dr. Reynolds and I talked about. Okay. She said that sometimes survivors of trauma find healing in helping others who've been through similar experiences. That sharing our stories can be powerful both for us and for people who need to know they're not alone. My chest tightened slightly. Are you thinking about sharing your story? Lily nodded slowly. My English teacher assigned a personal narrative essay for next semester. We're supposed to write about something that changed us, that made us who we are. And I thought... She twisted her hands together. I thought maybe I could write about what happened. Not all the details, I'm not ready for that. But about being a kid who had to carry a scary secret. About finding the courage to speak up. About healing, I measured my words carefully. That's a big decision, sweetheart. Writing about it means other people will read it. Your classmates, teachers. Are you prepared for that? I think so. Her voice was uncertain but determined. I mean, I'm scared, but I'm also... I don't know. I keep thinking about other kids who might be going through something similar. Kids who think they have to stay quiet because the grown-up in their life told them to. Kids who feel like it's their fault or that no one will believe them. She looked at me with eyes suddenly much older than 13. If my story helps even one kid find the courage to ask for help, isn't that worth it? The weight of her compassion, her desire to transform her pain into purpose made my throat tight. Lily, that's incredibly brave and generous. But you don't owe anyone your story. You survived something horrible, and you get to decide what to do with that experience. If you want to keep it private, that's completely valid. If you want to share it, I'll support you. But the choice has to be yours for your own reasons, not because you feel obligated to help others. She considered this, nodded. I want to do it for me, too. Dr. Reynolds says writing can be therapeutic, that putting our experiences into words helps us process them. And I think I need to tell it. My way. In my words. So I can own it instead of it owning me. Pride swelled in my chest so intensely it almost hurt. This child, this extraordinary young woman, had taken everything meant to destroy her and was alchemizing it into strength. Then I'll support you completely, I said. If you're ready, I'm ready. We can work on it together if you want. Or you can write it alone and show me when you're finished. Whatever you need. Lily smiled, the real smile that crinkled her eyes, the one I'd despaired of ever seeing again during those dark, early months. Thanks, Dad. I think I want to try writing it myself first, but maybe you could read it before I turn it in. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything important. I'd be honored. The doorbell rang, pizza delivery. As Lily jumped up to get it chattering about wanting extra Parmesan, I sat for a moment longer in the space her courage had created. 3 years ago, she'd been a terrified child, trapped in an impossible situation. 2 years ago, she'd been a traumatized survivor carrying crushing guilt. 1 year ago, she'd been slowly learning to trust that safety could last. Now she was choosing to transform her story into something that might light the way for others. My daughter was going to be okay. More than okay. She was going to be extraordinary. My name is Graham Steele. I'm 59 years old, a father, an engineer, and a survivor of something unimaginable, my own wife's attempt to murder me and our daughter for insurance money. 3 years have passed since that November night when 10-year-old Lily whispered words that saved our lives. 3 years of therapy, legal battles, sleepless nights, and the slow work of rebuilding what was shattered. People ask how we survived betrayal that deep, that personal. The truth is complicated. We survived because we had help, therapists, lawyers, friends, and community. We survived because Lily was braver than any child should have to be. We survived because I finally learned to listen when it mattered most. But we also survived because I chose to learn from the worst experience of my life rather than let it destroy the rest of it. So if you're reading this, I want to share what I've learned. Not as someone with all the answers, but as someone who walked through fire and came out changed. Listen to your children. Really listen. The single most important lesson: children tell the truth more often than we give them credit for. When a child says they're scared, when they hint at something wrong, when behavior suddenly changes, pay attention. I almost didn't believe Lily that night. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as confusion, as anything other than horrifying truth. Because believing her meant accepting that my wife of 19 years was capable of murdering our daughter. But I chose to believe her. That choice saved our lives. Children rarely fabricate elaborate conspiracies. They don't have the life experience to create the kind of detailed, consistent story Lily told me. When a child comes to you with something impossible sounding, don't dismiss it because it challenges your worldview. Investigate. Ask questions. Take them seriously. 1 in 7 children experience abuse or neglect in the United States. Most never report it because they don't think anyone will believe them, or because the abuser convinced them it's their fault, or because they've been threatened into silence. Be the adult who believes. Be the safe place children can turn to when their world is falling apart. Recognize the warning signs. Looking back, there were signs I missed. Not of the murder plot, Diane was too careful, but signs that something fundamental had shifted in our family. Diane's increasing distance and secrecy, her sudden interest in updating life insurance, comments designed to plant financial worry. Lily's changes were more obvious in retrospect. Nightmares that started months before the fire, reluctance to be alone with her mother, the way she'd flinch when Diane raised her voice. Grades dropping despite being a strong student. I attributed these to stress, to normal family ups and downs, to Lily's sensitivity. I didn't see them as pieces of a larger pattern because I didn't want to. Coercive control, what Diane exercised over Lily, often goes unnoticed because it's psychological, not physical. No bruises, no broken bones, just slow erosion of a child's safety and self-worth. Watch for isolation. Watch for secrecy. Watch for a child afraid of disappointing a particular adult. Watch for explanations that don't add up, for persistent behavior changes, for the feeling in your gut that something isn't right. Trust that feeling. Acknowledge your failings without drowning in them. I made mistakes, significant ones. I prioritized career over family. I was absent physically during long project trips, emotionally even when home. I stopped asking Diane how she was really doing after our fertility struggles. 19 years of marriage had become routine we executed, rather than a relationship we nurtured. None of that justifies what Diane did. Nothing justifies plotting to murder your husband and child for money. Her choices were hers alone, driven by her own pain, her own moral failures. But I can acknowledge my part in creating an environment where our marriage was vulnerable, where Diane felt disconnected enough to be susceptible to manipulation, where cracks in our foundation were wide enough for poison to seep through. This isn't about blame. It's about responsibility. The responsibility we all have to tend relationships, to notice when people we love are struggling to create space for honesty even when uncomfortable. I failed at that, and I've had to learn to forgive myself for those failures while still holding Diane accountable for her choices. Learn to forgive yourself, not necessarily the abuser. People expect me to say I've forgiven Diane. That healing requires letting go of anger and embracing compassion for the woman who tried to kill my daughter. I haven't forgiven her. I don't know if I ever will. Forgiveness isn't a requirement for healing. What matters is not allowing her actions to control the rest of our lives. What matters is choosing to move forward, rather than staying frozen in rage and betrayal. But forgiving myself, that's been essential. I've had to forgive myself for not seeing signs sooner, for choosing work over family, for failures as a husband that, while they didn't cause Diane's crimes, contributed to emotional distance that made our family vulnerable. Dr. Reynolds taught me something crucial: you can acknowledge mistakes and learn from them without taking responsibility for someone else's evil. I can say, I should have been more present, and Diane alone is responsible for trying to murder us, in the same breath. That's been the hardest work, separating legitimate regrets from Diane's inexcusable actions. Learning to hold both truths simultaneously. For anyone reading this who sees themselves in our story, if you're a parent worried about your child, trust your instincts. Document concerning behavior. Reach out to professionals. Don't wait for absolute proof. A false alarm is infinitely better than a tragedy you didn't prevent. If you're a child reading this, adults should believe you. If the first adult doesn't believe you, tell another. Keep telling until someone listens. What's happening is not your fault. You deserve safety. You deserve to be believed. If you suspect abuse in a family, speak up. Make the call. File the report. You might save a life. 3 years later, here's what I know: Lily is thriving, strong, compassionate, remarkably resilient. She's chosen to transform trauma into purpose to help other children find their voices. I'm prouder of her than words can express. I'm learning to be the father I should have been all along. Present, attentive, willing to hear hard truths, creating a home where honesty matters more than comfort. We're building a life that honors what we survived without being defined by it. But we got lucky. Lily spoke up at exactly the right moment. I chose to believe her despite every instinct screaming otherwise. The pieces fell into place in a way that saved us. Not every family gets that chance, so I'm asking you, begging you, don't wait for a crisis to pay attention. Don't assume people you love are fine just because they say they are. Don't dismiss warning signs because acknowledging them would be inconvenient. Don't wait until it's too late to believe the people you love. Thank you for listening to our story. I hope it never becomes yours. But if it does, remember, children tell the truth. Trust them. Protect them. Listen when it matters most. Because sometimes listening is the difference between surviving and becoming a tragedy. Looking back at my journey through family betrayal, I realize how close I came to losing everything. Not just my life, but my daughter's future, her trust, her innocence. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound, because it comes from the place that should be safest. My advice: don't be like me. Don't prioritize work over the people you love. Don't assume everything is fine just because no one's complaining. Don't wait for a crisis to start paying attention. I ignored signs, dismissed concerns, and nearly paid the ultimate price. The lesson I carry now: family betrayal often hides in plain sight, disguised as stress or moodiness or just a phase. Trust your instincts. Listen to your children, really listen. They see things we adults miss because we're too busy, too distracted, too convinced we know better. These grandpa stories I'm sharing aren't just entertainment. They're warnings wrapped in narrative. Grandpa stories teach us that evil doesn't always wear a mask, sometimes it sits across the dinner table. And the most important grandpa stories are the ones that remind us love requires vigilance, not just feeling. God has a plan, even in our darkest moments. I believe that now. Lily's courage, the timing of her confession, the support we found, none of that was coincidence. Thank you for walking this path with me to the very end. I'd love to hear your perspective. What would you do if you found yourself in Graham and Lily's impossible situation? Drop a comment below. Your insights matter. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing so you won't miss future narratives. A gentle reminder, while inspired by real social issues and actual events, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content doesn't align with your preferences, feel free to explore other videos that suit you better.